Don't ever do that.
I know. Alrighty, Elijah. Take it away, man.
Alrighty, welcome back to another episode of the Battlefields Bourbon Podcast. I'm Elijah, joined by my co-host Jack, and we've got another special guest for you today. We've got Aaron Siever from Aaron's Civil War Travels, and we're going to get into the battles of Cross Keys and Port Republic.
Yeah.
But before we do that, we've got our bourbon for the day. It's going to be Isaac Bowman Port Barrel Finished. This is a Virginia straight bourbon made by the A. Smith Bowman Distillery over in Fredericksburg, Virginia. So we're going to give this one a try, and we're going to...
There we go. Nice pop.
Beautiful sound.
And if you guys couldn't tell by Elijah describing it, port finished and the Battles of Port Republic. So there's our connection with this episode's bourbon and Battlefield today.
Gotta do it.
Gotta do it.
And for those of you also that don't know what a port finish is, that just means that the bourbon is finished in a port wine barrel.
And I just learned what port wine was yesterday. So shout out to my friend and historian Jim for telling me what port was, and I'll have to give that a try. But I'm excited to try this, bourbon today.
Yeah, so this one is another one that's owned by Sazerac, like Buffalo Trace. Sazerac is their parent company, so we don't have a mash bill to kind of give you guys. Word on
Secrets.
The street is that Buffalo Trace distills Bowman's mash bills for bourbon the first 2 times, and then they send them up to Virginia to be distilled one more time through a pot still. Can't confirm or deny. I'll leave that to them to disclose. But yeah, so like I said, it's a bourbon finished in a port barrel, so you'll kind of pick up those notes of port wine in that little sweetness, little fruitiness.
Yeah, if it's just me, just by smelling it, does anyone else smell like you can smell a wine smell?
Smells sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
Okay,
sweet.
so it's
Got
not just
a
me.
candy kind of raisin smell to it. Yeah, you can definitely pick that up. It's got a little heat to it for 92 proof.
Yeah.
I don't dislike that though. I think it's good for what it is,
more
especially
heat
like
than I
barrel proofs
expected,
or higher
yeah.
proof bourbons. It gives you a little more of that flavor punch that you'd be looking for. But yeah, I mean it's definitely an all around good bourbon. Not one that's hard to find. Isaac is probably the easiest of the 3 of their bourbons to find. And then obviously you get your A. Smith Bowman, Abraham Bowman. Those are like their lottery
Bowman
releases.
Brothers.
Yeah. But like your base 3, your Bowman Brothers, Isaac Bowman, and the John Jay single barrel, which has become increasingly hard to find. But Isaac Bowman is definitely the easiest of the 3 to come across. About $40, $45 MSRP.
Have you noticed with your bourbon experience, because you've been in the bourbon game a lot longer than I have, and I think a little more probably dedicated than yours in a way, just how much more serious Elijah takes it. Have you find that the Bowman brand has just kind of exploded within the past couple of years, or there's always kind of been a thing there?
Yeah. So people, I guess people have kind of discovered that there's that Sazerac connection with the A. Smith Bowman Distillery, and they're like, okay, well, they make good bourbon because everything that Sazerac owns in terms of bourbon companies is usually going to be really solid. I mean, they've got Buffalo Trace, they've got Barton 1792, they've got now A. Smith Bowman, and they just make great products. So now people are starting to kind of catch on to that, and I think that's part of why they're blowing up, but also the fact that people think that there's a connection there with A. Smith Bowman to Buffalo Trace Distillery. And anything Buffalo Trace puts their name on or makes, it's going to get hard to find at some point or another. John J. Bowman, especially their single barrel. We'll get to that one in a different episode, so I won't spoil too much of that, but I will say that it's becoming increasingly hard to find, and I know people are starting to put that one out there on the secondary market at an outrageous price gouge, which I do not condone. But
Yeah, I'm sure we'll hit all the Bowman ones at some point.
Because these are always great. I love them.
Yeah, the first bottle I ever bought was the Bowman Brothers. Still have that. And the thing that kind of pointed me to it was just I love the bottle itself, the shape, but then also that background image.
Yeah.
That's on the inside of the back label that comes through the glass. And it's just so cool. Like just the old timey little sketch drawing that's there. And I think it's different per bottle, which is pretty neat.
Yes, you've got like Isaac, and that's actually a drawing of Isaac Bowman. Like he's a real person. If you're familiar with like the Middletown, Strasburg area, the Bowmans, like Bowman's
in the
Mill,
Shenandoah Valley,
in the Shenandoah Valley. Yeah, I mean that's
Same
that's
Bowman.
them. That's the family. Isaac, John, George. There's other Bowmans as well. Abraham. all Revolutionary War era Virginia militia soldiers and higher ranking officers. So they've definitely got some deep-rooted history here in Virginia, and I think that's something that they kind of play off of, which is great. I mean, it's super cool, and it makes you kind of feel a little closer to home when you're having this one.
Yeah, I think that's, I don't know how other states' perspectives are, but as I'm new to the bourbon scene and new to, Virginia alcohol period kind of, but that home team kind of feeling you get with a Virginia-made bourbon or a Virginia packaged bourbon in this case at times, with that other episode we did with the Mount Defiance and any other ones we do in the future where they're Virginia bourbons or even West Virginia, having stuff close to home is really cool. Like, it's just a cool aspect of it. And I'm sure there's people that are like, well, it's not bourbon unless it's made in Kentucky. And it's like, sure. Okay. But, that's not where we draw the line on this podcast.
Hey, so United States law says as long as it's made in the continental U.S., you're good. So anywhere in the U.S., you can make bourbon. It doesn't have to be
continental.
Yeah. As far as I know, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm
so
pretty
Hawaiian
sure
bourbon.
I'm pretty sure Alaska and Hawaii don't count.
Oh.
I'm pretty sure that is the case. Someone can tell me if I'm wrong, but from what I heard, I'm pretty sure it's just continental U.S. But any state in the U.S. can make it. They just got to follow the rules that make bourbon, and then that's it. Kentucky obviously was one of the first to do it, unless you're a history buff like the three of us are, and then you'll find out that the people that initially introduced bourbon were from Virginia. So you could probably kind of argue that bourbon got its roots and it starts here in Virginia.
That'd be a neat episode for us to do at some point. Just diving into the history of bourbon. And we're going to do that.
Absolutely.
That's happening. Noted down.
We're going to do it.
Yeah. Well, awesome. I'm enjoying this so far. This is a good bourbon. The port finished, you definitely get those different notes that you're not getting with your typical.
Yeah, it adds a little uniqueness to it, something that you're not normally used to.
Yeah.
But yeah, port barrel finishes are getting more and more popular. You've got Angel's Envy; they're probably at the top of the game with port barrel finish, and then Isaac Bowman is obviously a close second. And I think a lot of people are starting to think that maybe even Isaac Bowman beats Angel's Envy. I won't say that because I don't.
We'll let everyone else decide.
Yeah, we'll let the listeners decide. But I mean, both great options and both readily available these days. So
yeah, no, exciting stuff. So as we sip on this port finished bourbon here, let's dive into the battle or the battlefield and the topic. So it's not just one specific battle. Even in some cases, often historians try to bunch these two together, which I think myself, Aaron, and Elijah would agree that that's incorrect if you study this entire thing. But this port finish will lead us right into the Battle of Port Republic. But you can't have Port Republic unless you have Cross Keys. And Aaron will tell you can't have Cross Keys unless you have the Battle of Harrisonburg. So, Aaron, if you want to set us up for how we get to the upper Shenandoah Valley, the southern end of the Shenandoah Valley, in the late spring, early summer of 1862, in the famous Stonewall Jackson's Valley campaign.
Yeah, so this is going to be the end of Jackson's famous Valley campaign of 62. Prior to this, and Jack, I know you and I are on the same page in this. I believe the Valley campaign actually started in 1861, as Jackson did not sit idle as soon as he took command. He's attacking Dam Number 5. Later, he's going to Romney. Mm-hmm. Now, then we have the attack at Kernstown. Now we're into what we call the Valley campaign of 62. But really, Jackson this whole time has been doing stuff. Some say the Valley campaign starts at Kernstown. Some say McDowell. McDowell is certainly a good starting spot. May 8th, 1862. That's the first Confederate victory of that campaign. Jackson's going to chase Union General John C. Fremont, chase part of his force under Milroy all the way to Franklin. When he gets to Franklin, he's going to turn around and come back because there's 20,000 Union soldiers in pretty good position in Franklin. So he'll come back into the valley. He'll then attack Front Royal, the garrison there, small engagement in Middletown, move on up, first Winchester, and he'll go up all the way to Charlestown and hang out for a little bit. In the meantime, this is causing a lot of concern for the Union government, as Jackson, they're thinking this guy's going to sweep in and take the Capitol, take the president, and God knows what else. Not that Jackson didn't think about doing that, but he would need some more reinforcements in order to do that. At that point, he's going to be he's just beaten Nathaniel P. Banks in Winchester, but that force is still around. But he's also going to be facing Fremont's going to come back on the scene, and he's going to be marching up towards Strasburg through the West Virginia mountains, or Western Virginia mountains. During this time, it's still Virginia. It won't be West Virginia until June of 1963. In the meantime, they're going to recall a guy named James Shields and some of his men. They're going to recall them back to the valley as they were heading over to Irvin McDowell. They're part of his command as he's moving down toward Fredericksburg to assist McClellan on the peninsula. They're going to call Shields back into the valley, and Shields has got a little bit of history with Jackson at Kernstown. Technically, he is the winner. I say technically because he was wounded and didn't really give any good information, anything that made sense at that battle. That battle was won by Nathan Kimball, and it's the only battle Jackson loses in the valley. But anyway, that's a different story.
Yeah, we covered that with Mike Robinson in the previous episode.
Yeah, that's a different story. So, but yeah, so you're going to have Shields and Fremont now trying to get Jackson, and they're actually going to almost pinch him there at Strasburg as he starts to move back up the valley toward Stanton.
Up as in south. So
yes.
I guess let's set that up because we haven't.
The river runs the wrong way in the valley. That's basically what it is.
The valley the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia runs from a southwestern to a northeastern direction.
Yes.
With the Shenandoah Valley running, let's just say south to north.
Yes.
Being split in half by the Massanutten Mountains. So there's a north fork and a south fork of the Shenandoah that run and then meet where Front Royal is, and about close to the lower Shenandoah Valley. From there forms the Shenandoah River proper, running close to the Blue Ridge Mountains through Warren into Clark into Jefferson, meeting the Potomac River at Harper's Ferry.
Yep.
So when we say down the valley, that's the northern end of the Shenandoah Valley, Winchester, and if we say up, that's Stanton.
So up is south, down is north.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
And then we're going to complicate it even more. You talked about the Massanutten because that's going to play a part in this part of the campaign. The Massanutten splits the Shenandoah Valley, and on the other side, the east side of the Massanutten, it's going to be either the Luray or Page Valley.
But it's still the Shenandoah
Valley.
the
Shenandoah Valley, but it's just
to zoom in a little bit more. Yeah,
it's its own thing. So Jackson, he's going to be in the valley proper at this point at Strasburg. And as he comes down or up the valley, those two Union forces could have pinched him, and maybe we don't have a Battle of Cross Keys in Port Republic or anything like that, but they don't. There's some skirmishing that happens. Jackson actually slips right in between them and will continue. He is going to go to the east side of the Massanutten Mountain. Shields will pursue him on that side. Fremont will stay parallel to him on the Shenandoah proper side. Toward Harrisonburg. And the reason he does this is it puts the mountain between Fremont and Shields. He's going to burn the bridges as he goes, and on top of it, the weather's going to help. The river's going to rise. At one point, Shields will sit for 3 days at White House Bridge before deciding to move on down the river road and around. Because he wants to cross into the Newmarket Gap and meet with Fremont and Newmarket.
But he's stuck in Page Valley.
He's stuck in the Page Valley outside of Luray. So he's going to delay himself for a couple days. That's going to give Jackson time to get up the valley toward Harrisonburg. He's then going to kind of whip around the edge of the Massanutten Mountains. Massanutten ends in Rockingham County, just outside of McGaheysville, Virginia. And Jackson's he's gonna turn around and then he's gonna split his force. He's gonna send Richard Ewell with about 5,800 men to the area of Cross Keys. Now that particular spot is actually going to be scoped out by Colonel Elzey of the Confederate Army under Ewell's command on June 6th. Elzey's going to find this spot and say, "Hey, this is a heck of a spot for artillery and infantry. This is a very good defensible spot." And a couple days later, we'll find out. But also on June 6th, we're going to have the Battle of Harrisonburg, also known as Goods Farm.
Or Chestnut Ridge.
Or Chestnut
yeah,
Ridge.
It's got 3 names.
If you go there now, there's a a monument to Turner Ashby. Not a lot of the battlefield left. A lot is owned by JMU, and then kind of where some artillery was is Dream Come True Park. So if you have a little one, definitely go to Dream Come True Park. It's a lot of fun. They can fall down and not get hurt. But anyway, so we have that at Harrisonburg, and I'm going to back up just a little about Turner Ashby, who's the cavalry commander here in the Valley, and Stonewall Jackson. Jackson respects Ashby, but the cavalry is undisciplined. And so at one point, I believe it's late April, he actually takes the cavalry away from Ashby. By doing that, it upsets the cavalry. Yes, they're undisciplined, but they trust Ashby. They do what he says. Part of this had to do with burning of some bridges where they may have gotten into some Applejack and got a little drunk, and the bridge didn't quite get burned the way it was supposed to. So
this is in Page.
That's in Page County, Red Bridge. Okay. Jackson has enough at that point of what's going on there. So he's going to take the cavalry away. In turn, Ashby will put in his resignation. Jackson realizes very quickly that's a bad thing. And he's gonna recant and give Ashby the cavalry back. One of the few times that he does something like that. And we're going to see in this particular campaign, Jackson does a couple things. Really, at this point, Ewell should not be with him, even up to the Battle of First Winchester. But there's an order that the date may have been changed a little bit so that it just coincided where Ewell could be with Jackson. So we know Jackson's a stickler for rules, but obviously there's some stretching there sometimes. But anywho, so that's an important thing to understand, how much the cavalry really loves Turner Ashby, because we're going to see that play a role in the on June 8th. So the Battle of Harrisonburg will take place June 6th, as we said, Chestnut Ridge or Goods Farm. Harrisonburg, it starts out as the Confederate cavalry with a little bit of infantry is going to try to surprise the Union vanguard. That doesn't work because the Union troops don't go where Ashby thought they were going to go. So they have to redeploy. There's a sharp fight there on Chestnut Ridge. During that fight, Sir Percy Wyndham will be captured. He's a Union mercenary, so to speak. He's been captured. He had said he was going to sack Ashby, and Ashby captures him. Not long after that, Ashby and Wyndham never get to meet, because not long after that, Ashby is knocked off his horse. His horse is shot, and as had happened several times actually throughout the Valley campaign, but he's going to try to lead a charge, and he's going to be shot and killed pretty much instantly there at Harrisonburg. The Confederates will it's kind of a stalemate. It's more inconclusive than anything there at Harrisonburg, but it's just a filling out action. Fremont doesn't move super fast. We've seen that throughout the war up to this point. John C. Fremont is not the fastest moving general. He could have come into the Valley a lot sooner than he did this last time, but he's filling out where Jackson's forces are. Again, Elzey has found this spot outside the town, or the little hamlet of Cross Keys, just east of Harrisonburg. And Ewell thinks it's a great spot and has decided to set up the rest of his army there. Jackson, meanwhile, is down in the town of Port Republic.
Which is about how far from Cross?
So you're probably only about 8 miles, something like that. It's not super long. If that.
And Cross, I mean, just to put it in perspective, we're just east of Harrisonburg, southeast of Harrisonburg.
Probably about 5 miles of the current city limits.
Along the Port Republic Road,
yes.
Hence the name, is a road that connects the town of Port Republic.
Runs right down the middle of the Cross Keys battlefield.
I mean, not to McDowell. I said McDowell. Harrisonburg.
And I mean, eventually, I guess it could end up in McDowell.
Yeah.
But.
So, Battle of Harrisonburg, but Ashby's kind of, in a way, just covering that road in a sense. He's covering the Port Republic Road.
He's covering that road, trying to figure out, it's filling out action on both parts, trying to figure out what Fremont's doing. Fremont's trying to figure out what Jackson's doing. So that's why you have that engagement there at Harrisonburg. And of course, the plan doesn't go the way it was supposed to.
So as you travel down Port Republic Road from there,
Yes.
Port Republic Road comes into a major crossroads with, what was the name of the road at the time?
So now it's called the Kieseltown Road or the Cross Keys Road. I think probably at that time it may have been called the Cross Keys Road.
And they cross there, and just
so
south
they
of that
cross.
intersection is the little hamlet of Cross Keys. Yeah, like you said.
South of the intersection, a little bit farther down, probably, I don't know, another maybe 3 miles is the hamlet of Cross Keys, and there's still a building out there with the Cross Keys on it.
Yeah, and Cross Keys, sits about maybe a half a mile, 3/4 of a mile north of
Weir's Cave.
Mill Creek.
Oh, Mill Creek, yeah.
Which cuts across that countryside there.
Yeah.
And just on the south side of Mill Creek is a massive ridge line that runs in a slanted facing direction towards that intersection, in a way facing Harrisonburg, let's say. So if you're standing there, so like you said, Ewell moves to that spot.
It's a very big
it's a great defensive position.
Commanding position of that.
Commands
of
the
that
whole landscape.
Yep. So he's going to, Ewell with his 5,800 men that Jackson have left with him is going to deploy his 5,800 men up there. He's going to deploy on a place called Mill Ridge, which is preserved by the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields National Historic District. And then he's going to deploy his artillery next to that. And it's kind of through a little wood line there called Artillery Ridge. They're basically the same ridge, but what's preserved is where the Marylanders were, and there's a cool monument to Maryland out there, so definitely go see that. But the artillery, that spot is still there, and hopefully one day that can be preserved. But it's a heck of an artillery spot.
Overlooks the entire
towards
that intersection.
Toward the intersection, covers the road, covers the flanks. It's a very good spot. In the meantime, like I said, Jackson's going to be down in the town of Port Republic, and an incident's going to occur there. And this actually kind of all is a simultaneous thing, but what happens with Jackson is happens a little bit before the battle. While he's in town, James Shields has sent Samuel Carroll with some cavalry, infantry, and artillery toward the town of Port Republic. And this is where the cavalry is going to come into play for the Confederates. Their commander, Turner Ashby's been killed. He's been taken to the Frank Kemper House, which is now run by the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields National Historic District in Port Republic on Water Street. And you can still go to the spot and see where his body was taken, and see the window that the soldiers look through. And they were very distraught. So there's accounts of these guys being out picketing the river, the south branch of the river, and seeing Yankees coming and just not saying anything, just kind of going. They're too distraught. They're supposed to be picketing. They're supposed to be doing this. They really don't do a whole lot. Now, some information does get back to the Confederates in Port Republic, and Jackson is told, hey, there's a Union force coming. And in Jackson fashion, he says, we'll fight them. My theory is that maybe, at this point, he's been pretty drained down by this campaign. We know that he goes without a lot of sleep, so he's probably sleeping at this point, letting Ewell do his thing up in Cross Keys. That's just an assumption of mine. But anyway, Jackson, whether he was sleeping or not, is going to find out very quickly. The Yankees are very close. An artillery shot is going to come out. It actually comes out a little early for Carroll. The infantry isn't up yet. Or at least most of it isn't up yet. And so the artillery fires quickly. So Carroll decides to go into town. And his force is going to split. They're going to go north and south in Port Republic. There's only two roads, Water Street and Main Street. And you can go there today. The town looks very similar. If you get lost in the town, it's your own fault because there's only two streets.
Yeah, Port Republic's, less... If you were there at the time of the war, it was a hustle and bustle.
It was a hustle. Yeah, you've got
tanneries,
mills, things. There's still the mill race is still there. Lots going on in the town of Port Republic at that time.
And I guess set up a little bit of the geography of Port Republic too. Why is Port Republic an important place as a town?
As a town, it sits right on the South River, which is the south branch of the river. Sits right on it. That river, of course, flows up to Front Royal, but there's a point there where another piece of I believe it's North River comes in and meets up with it, and so it's a great spot for being able to move things by water down the valley.
What do they call those boats? The oh gosh, gondolas.
Gondolas,
Yeah.
yes, gondolas.
And they it's about 95 miles south of Harper's Ferry.
Yes.
So folks would be able to, from the southern ends of Virginia, bring goods and services to Port Republic, send them up northward it'd be the South Fork of the Shenandoah, and then on the Shenandoah River proper, 95 miles all the way to Harper's Ferry, take apart the gondolas, sell the lumber, and then walk back catch a wagon back south to Port Republic.
Horse ride or something like that. And you've got a guy named J.C. Palmer in there that he owns a lot of, I say Port Republic should have been called Palmertown because dude owns everything if you look at the maps. But he's a predominant person in Port Republic and owns a lot of lots there. But so it's a happening little town. And Jackson has his headquarters at the Madison Hall up just off of Main Street. It's kind of around the corner. His reserve artillery and everything's there, including the Charlottesville artillery. Now, the Charlottesville artillery is a unit that has not seen combat. They've barely shot during practice. When Carroll attacks, are going to become heavily engaged. They are actually going to save some of the reserve artillery and things up there by Madison Hall. And this is really going to be their first shots fired in anger. And it's a surprise attack. Jackson, meantime, is actually going to get on a horse. It's not his horse. It's not Little Sorrel. But he can't control the horse. So eventually Little Sorrel will be brought to him. And it's a staff officer's horse that he had originally got on. But he's going to take off down Main Street. As he does so, and one of my favorite stories of this little narrow escape, as he does so, he's going to find his medical director, Hunter McGuire, along Main Street. And McGuire is going to be cussing the wagon guys, the guys with the ambulances and the wagons. And he's going to be cussing them. And Jackson, very religious. And in all this chaos, is literally just going to put his hand on McGuire's shoulder and basically ask him to do it without cussing.
It's so Jackson.
It's very Jacksonist.
And just like, if you folks ever go to the town of Port Republic and you see how small it is,
yes,
you can go to the street, and where this interaction happens is where the Methodist church is.
The Methodist church right across the street from that. You can still see the original house that was there. I'm losing what it was called in my mind right now, but that house is still there. Right there in that street, that interaction happens. McGuire and a couple others will get captured like right after that.
Yeah.
Jackson continues, and he'll continue across the North Bridge. There's also another story. There's, we think of this as Virginia, Port Republic, Cross Keys. Rockingham County was kind of back and forth. There were Union sympathizers and Confederate sympathizers.
Just like a lot of the counties in the valley.
But a little more Union in Port Republic, it sounds like, from what I've read. But there's a specific guy, his last name is Downs, and that house is still there. He is out talking to one of the Union soldiers on Water Street. And one of the men, they're down by the foundry on the south end of town, happens to be a resident of Port Republic. But he's in the Army. He is going to take a shot down the road toward Downs and this Yankee soldier. Now, whether he was trying to shoot Downs, who he knew to be a Yankee sympathizer, or to shoot the Yankee officer or trooper that was there, we don't know. I think at that point he's just like, well, if I get one of them, it works out. He ends up not hitting either of them. So not a very good shot, apparently. But anyway, back to Jackson. He is going to rush down Main Street and cross the North River Bridge. Now, the current bridge today is not where that was. You can still see the remnants of the North River Bridge. It was a covered bridge.
If you go to the end of Main Street today, you can go see where the bridge.
Yeah, you walk through the guardrail and you can walk right out to where the bridge was, the abutments of the bridge. But Jackson's going to cross across there, and he's going to turn around. He's going to see some troops coming in, and some Alabama troops had just gotten newer uniforms, kind of bluish looking. So Jackson sees these guys thinking, well, this is my Alabama troops. He's on the other side of this bridge. He's going to start waving his arms, and he's yelling commands. He sees a cannon come in. He wants that piece turned on the Union troops, right? The problem is that is a Union gun, and those are Union troops. Now,
what time of day is this again?
This is early morning.
Okay.
It's light out, but
that covered bridge is, I'm sure, dark in there.
It's still kind of dark in there. So as the men come up on the bridge, they're going to see Jackson over there, waving his hands and doing all this. They have no clue who that is at that point. One of the Union soldiers said, all we saw was some Confederate officer waving his hands and yelling something we couldn't hear. But Jackson believes he's giving his men orders. He's going to quickly realize that's not his men, is that cannon's going to fire through the bridge. He's going to end up disappearing over the hill and get some troops to come back into the town of Port Republic.
And you might be confused if you're listening, because you're like, okay, well, Jackson's on one side of the river with his headquarters.
Yeah.
But you just said, Aaron, that there's
crossed
Confederates on the other side of the river, but that's the case.
So there's a place called New Haven. It's no longer really a town. There's about 2 houses there right now. But New Haven was the main Confederate camp. That's where a lot of the infantry was camped.
On the other side of the river.
On the other side of the river. And the reason that is because Ewell is on that other side of the river. And so you want to be able to link up. If something happens where Jackson, for instance, the North River Bridge gets burned, then you're going to want your whole army as much as you possible together. So Jackson, in turn, when he crosses, he's going to go and get General Tolliver and bring his troops down. The cannon is operated by a guy named Gildea, and he's got that cannon pointed right in the bridge. He could take out a lot of soldiers as they come down. He's going to make a decision to turn that cannon just slightly and shoot into the bridge. His attempt is to knock the bridge down on top of the troops. It's a sturdy bridge. One shot's not going to do it. So that doesn't work, and the cannon will be captured. And the Union troops will be chased out of Port Republic at that point. Now, that's kind of the end of Jackson's narrow escape.
Which is a whole event.
It's a whole event all on its own.
And this is the morning of June 8th, 1862. This just happened.
Yes, and west of you're having the Battle of Cross Keys.
Yeah.
So Jackson will technically never make it to the Cross Keys battlefield. He will come up as far as just past Mill Creek Church to a little ridge, and he'll speak with, I believe he speaks with Elzey and another officer, and they give him the dispositions of what Ewell's force is. He doesn't even talk to Ewell. And when he gives those dispositions, Jackson and Jackson is formed, very good, and back to Port Republic he goes. Now, mind you, he's probably a little tired. He just got chased through town, and his adrenaline's up, I'm sure. But I think it's important to note that he trusts Ewell explicitly. He has put Ewell in command of this and believes that Ewell will take care of it. Now, Ewell is a guy who just weeks earlier, when Jackson went to McDowell, thought Jackson was crazy and nuts and had no idea what he was doing. He was just playing around in the mountains. Now there's complete confidence between the two. The Battle of Cross Keys will start out kind of slow. Fremont, again, a slow mover. He is going to start moving toward what is now called Union Church. Is now a Ruethan Club, but you can still see the area.
Near to the village of Cross Keys.
Near the village of Cross Keys. They're going to, as the Union starts to move forward, they're going to face the 15th Alabama. There's a cemetery there. The 15th Alabama was in that cemetery, and they will be loading and firing from the cemetery. The Confederate line is a lot farther back. If you want to tour the battlefield at Cross Keys, follow the 15th Alabama because they're everywhere.
And this is the same 15th Alabama that you hear in the fame of
Yep.
Gettysburg that charges up against the 20th Maine.
Yep. And these are the same guys. So there's going to be some sharp skirmishing to start out as Ewell is getting his dispositions correct on artillery and Mill Ridge. The 15th Alabama will doggedly fall back. They're going to just give up a little bit of ground at a time as the Union troops come forward. They're going to be facing the 8th Virginia Union and the 60th Ohio under Clauseret. And eventually you're going to have Schenck and Milroy come in. Now, these guys have fought in a battle. They fought at the Battle of McDowell. They're experienced troops. they're going to be the ones that go over this rough terrain to attack artillery in Mill Ridge.
Yeah, open fields pretty much, but rolling hills.
Rolling hills. And then we know there was a fence up there on Artillery Ridge and Mill Ridge, which just gives the Confederates a little more cover up there. So Milroy and Schenck are going to be attacking that area. They're not going to be successful. That's going to be your most heated attacks. As Milroy will continue to push forward. Milroy, until 63, is not necessarily a bad general. 63 goes a little crazy after Second Winchester. But at this point, he's a hard fighter and the best hair in the Civil War. I can't deny that.
The Gray Eagle.
But the amount of artillery here, we have 14 guns setting on Artillery Ridge. They're just decimating these Ohio and West Virginia troops that have been in battle. You're going to have, I'm sure of Gettysburg fame, Joseph Latimer, known as the Boy Major. He gets that name from this battle from Cross Keys. He is very good at what he does. Meanwhile, the 15th Alabama has moved back to here, and they're going to continue to move out toward one of my favorite Civil War personalities, Isaac Trimble. Isaac Ridgway Trimble is an older man. He's a grumpy old man. He just does what he wants. And he's now in command of some troops under Ewell. And Jackson likes him. So he tries to get Trimble some troops. And he puts those under Ewell. He's going to be in command of the 21st Georgia, 16th Mississippi, and the 15th Alabama at one point. Those troops are set in line with the artillery. If you go there now, there's the Mill Creek Country Store, great little store to go into and get a sandwich and a drink. But that's where Trimble starts out. He does not like that position.
If you look at the terrain, the main Confederate body from left to right, with the way it's filled in, is anchored on both sides by two roads.
Yes,
and this is filling in the wide distance that's been created between the Port Republic and Cross Keys roads crossing, but then continuing on from where the intersection is. So it's filling in from there, from the Cross Keys road all the way to the Port Republic road. But okay, they're filled in. Trimble's on the other side, the east side technically of the Port Republic road.
He's got Goods Mill Road and a ravine,
which continues on to the right.
Yes, Goods Mill Road continues on, and it'll meet up with Port Republic Road.
In Trimble's, but like you said, if that ridge line they're on continues on across the Port Republic Road, let's say to the Goods Mill Road, the ridge line that they're on is where you said this Mill Creek Country Store is today. And like you said, so continue after this, but Trimble doesn't like it.
Yes.
And that's because...
Well, it's a lot lower than where he wants to be.
Mm-hmm.
The ridge starts to slope down as you go there. Even there's some man-made stuff now, but you can still see how that ridge begins to slope down into that ravine.
It's a little further back, too, from where the main Confederate force
it kind of curves back. So Trimble is going to request from Ewell to move forward up to what's called Victory Hill. And that is on the Widow Pence farm owned by the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields National Historic District. So a lot of great stuff saved in the valley in that particular area. But he's going to move up there, and there's a fence line there. He's going to put his 21st Georgia, 16th Mississippi, and the 15th Alabama behind there.
In that order.
Some of the 21st North Carolina troops are going to be involved, and they are going to actually be farther out as skirmishers. Facing them will be the 8th New York. Now, the 8th New York is an inexperienced unit. They're predominantly Dutch, German. It's possible that their commander was drunk during this. There's no...
Rumor has
it he was drinking bourbon. But rumor has it that he was intoxicated. There's no hard evidence.
But, I mean, this is a point... in an accusation that a lot of generals get.
Oh, yeah.
As a result of a disaster.
As a result of a disaster.
So continue.
Now, this is going to be a massive disaster.
For the 8th New York.
The 8th New York is going to march without flankers, and that's guys out to your side. They're going to march without skirmishers, guys out in front. They are going to get a couple shots from the 21st North Carolina.
Skirmishers.
From those skirmishers, but they're not – it just doesn't compute that there's something in front of them. They think the Confederates are farther back. As they walk up the hill, and Jack, I know you've been there. Obviously, we've been there as park rangers. As you walk up that hill and you crest it, you understand why it's going to be so devastating. The Confederates are behind this fence. I think it's close.
A fence at the end of a woodlot.
At the end of a woodlot.
And these 8th New Yorkers are marching in a clover field.
Yep, marching in a clover field. No idea those guys are there.
Aren't they they're singing songs in German.
They're having a good time.
Marching in parade, let's say. They're not prepared for engagement.
They haven't been in combat. So as they're coming up, the Confederates can see them before they see the Confederates. Once they top that hill, the Confederates are going to rise up, and you're going to have, I believe it's about 1,600 muskets that are going to go off at one time, and it's just going to decimate the 8th New York. They're pretty much going to cease to exist to be a unit. Those that do survive are going to be taken off running back down the hill. You will have the 45th New York come up to try to kind of stall that, but they're not going to come up that hill. At that point, this is literally maybe a 10-minute ordeal with the 8th New York. One of the soldiers even said, as they looked out, it just looked like a bunch of dead crows out there because of the dark uniforms and the clover. It was crazy. One of the quotes from a member of the 21st Georgia, he says, the smoke and fog prevented me seeing the effect of our fire until I mounted the fence. So that's the fence they were hiding behind. I then noticed that the enemy were in great confusion. But when we reached their line, so Trimble and them, they're going to advance after they unleash this hell upon the 8th New York. But when we reached their line, we saw the most appalling sight. There lay in the clover most of the 8th New York Regiment, either dead or wounded. And that's Captain James Nisbet of the 21st Georgia, who says that. So these guys are seeing that, and fighting is going to basically stop right there. What's going to happen is it's going to shift farther to the right. Under Walker, you have the 25th and 13th Virginia. They're going to be on the Confederate right flank over near Goods Mill Road.
They're going to continue to push this line.
Yes, they're going to continue to push that line out. The Union troops on that side, largely inexperienced. Your experienced ones are attacking Artillery Ridge. They're going to try to turn and come in against Walker and try to turn the Confederate right flank. That's their goal. That's not going to work out for them, as Trimble's going to continue fighting. He's going to move his men into what we now call Trimble's Ravine, and Walker is going to lead a counterattack. There's artillery that's really giving the Confederates a hard time on that right flank. They will go and silence those guns. Once they do that, there's still going to be some firing at the end, but Fremont's going to slowly fall back. Mm-hmm. Now, he is not necessarily – he's defeated but not destroyed, not devastated.
Not sent running from the field.
Right. And another thing to look at is we talked about Ewell having 5,800 men. Fremont's got 11,500. That's a pretty big force and a pretty big gap. He doesn't use all his troops. And the attacks are not planned very well. So in the meantime, now Ewell's goal is to just hold Fremont. Jackson has started making dispositions to fight Shields down outside of Port Republic. But Isaac Trimble he's still amped up. They just had an amazing, effort up here with the 8th New York and the flank attack. Trimble wants to continue attacking. And he's going to implore several times to Ewell to allow him to attack. And Ewell finally, Ewell's going to be like, look, we're not here to do that. We're outnumbered. We're here to protect the rear. While Jackson gets his dispositions, then we're going to move. The rest of the army's going to Port Republic. Trimble will continue to implore him on it. And finally, Ewell will say, okay, you can attack, but the rest of the army's going to Port Republic. At that point, Trimble's going to go, that's a bad idea. I'm going with the rest of the army. So that'll end the battle of Cross Keys. Now, the Confederates will leave their campfires burning, and they're going to move out early in the morning. Jackson, meanwhile, is down in Port Republic, And
so he's back in port.
He is
after
back
this. So
in
they
port.
don't burn the bridge.
Don't burn the North River Bridge because
Federals,
now they need that connection with Ewell.
So Federals are pushed out of the town after the taking
narrow
of it.
escape.
Yeah.
Yep. And Carroll's pushed back. Jackson is now going to be facing a guy by the name of Tyler, who is part of James Shields' command.
Coming from the Page Valley.
Coming from the Page Valley, Conrad's store, present day Elkton, Virginia. They're going to be set up along the Lewiston Lane, and they're going to have a good position there. He's actually got all his troops set up there. Jackson wants to leave Port Republic early, but he gets delayed. One reason he gets delayed is kind of, although he got Tolliver the day before to come down and help him in Port Republic, he and Tolliver don't get along. It's kind of a thing with Jackson where he and his subordinates don't always get along. He's going to make Tolliver, who is the closest unit to cross their makeshift pontoon bridges, he's going to make him wait and be the link to Ewell. So he's not going to take his closest troops across the river. They will make I guess you can call it a pontoon bridge. It's going to be wagons with some planks across it. And some of the Confederate pontoon bridge. And some of the soldiers are going to, once they make it to the other side, they're going to start making bets about which comrades might fall into the water, because as they march, it's making the river angry. All that movement, the river's not happy. It's up a little bit anyway. So they're going to be making these bets about their comrades falling. So there's still kind of a jolly, fun time going on. They've been very successful throughout this campaign. Farther down along the Lewiston Lane near the Lewiston Mill or Lewis Mill, there's another bridge that crosses there. That bridge has been burned to prevent Shields and Fremont from getting together. The only bridge remaining is that North River Bridge. Now, once Ewell gets down into Port Republic, that bridge will be burned to protect Jackson's rear. But as Jackson marches out, he's going to march out. His units are not going to come online until about 6 a.m. And when he does, those units are going to be coming out piecemeal. He's not going to have his full weight. It's not going to be a very Jackson-esque type battle where he's got overwhelming numbers and cohesion. A couple reasons for this is Fremont. Really, the big reason is Fremont. Jackson needs to beat Shields' command before Fremont gets there. Again, Fremont's been stopped, but he's not defeated. Fremont will move out that morning of June 9th in full battle line.
Yeah, line of battle.
He will go all the way past Mill Creek Church before he gets back in the column. So that's going to delay a good while. Even though Fremont's kind of slow, Jackson can't afford to take the time to wait.
Yeah, to put that in perspective, if you don't get it, the instead of column where you're marching in a, 4-person wide line or a 2-person wide line, whatever it is, you're marching along roads using roads. Fremont at this point, until like Aaron said, gets to Mill Creek Church,
past Mill Creek Church, well behind the Confederate line.
He is marching in line, so full line of battle like you see in the pictures and in the movies and
coming
whatever.
Across all this broken
terrain,
ridge lines and terrain, up Artillery Ridge, up and over these ridges.
It's not the most efficient way to move an army if you're trying to pursue.
Not at all. But he does this because the Confederate fires are still burning. He thinks the Confederates are
He doesn't know.
still there.
He doesn't exactly know where the Confederates are.
Doesn't know where Ewell is. Ewell, meantime, is marching to Jackson. Now, when Jackson deploys, he's going to have like the 5th Virginia, 7th Virginia, 27th and 31st. They're all going to come online at some point during this battle. But the key spot to the Port Republic battlefield is going to be known as the Coaling.
Yeah, and let's set up a little bit of the battlefield here for Port Republic. You have the South Fork of the Shenandoah River, so this is just a little bit north of Port Republic. Yeah. On the left, the South Fork of the Shenandoah on the left of the Confederates, the right of the Federals. As that flank, and then on the right you have the base of the Blue Ridge Mountains running right there. Yep. So it's basically this just river plain area in between the base of the Blue Ridge Mountains and the Shenandoah River that's boxing this battlefield in, and you have the Federals coming in from one side of it and the Confederates coming in from the other. Yeah. So you have a very narrow field of battle here.
And to put it in perspective, this isn't a very early morning battle. This battle's, much like most of Jackson's battles, are only about 4 hours. But this would be modern day, right? Kind of modern day 340 runs right through the battlefield. At the time, it was called the River Road, which would be running by the coaling. Again, the coaling has been saved. That's a big preservation.
Yeah,
save.
it's 100 and I want to say close to 120 acres, or
Yeah,
no, it's
114
acres. I want to say now, totally saved.
107 just finally saved
Yeah.
with what we had, what was there before.
Courtesy of the American Battlefield Trust when they first saved
Yes.
what you can visit now.
And then Shenandoah Valley Battlefields National Historic District has taken that site over and expanded upon
The additional
that.
107 acres,
Yes,
where Aaron will get into detail about the layout of that.
So that is going to be a massive artillery position. You're going to have about 7 guns setting in that coaling area. 3 guns under Clark. They're U.S. regulars. They are going to be at the very top. And they're rifled pieces. Just down from him, there's a house currently up there. It's called Mapleton. Pretty close to that area is going to be Robinson. Now, there are accounts that he may have had 2 guns. Most of what I've seen, he has 1 gun up there.
Wasn't our speculation when you and I were researching this a couple years ago for some anniversary programs that one of those guns, or correct me if I'm wrong, one of those guns that they said if he had more, we thought, okay, it's down closer to the Shenandoah River near Linwood.
Yes.
Okay.
That, and then on top of, you have to remember that 2 guns had been captured the day before in Port Republic under Gadea. And I believe they were part of Robinson. But then you have Huntington. Huntington's going to have 3 guns at the bottom, right along the current road, or the old-time road there, the River Road.
River Road, yeah.
He's going to have 3 guns there. Now, he does have 2 other guns that are farther across the road down by the Lewison Farm a little ways. But most of his 3 guns are going to be right there, and they're going to play an important role. Now, they have shells. They fire shells that have paper mache on them.
Shinkle shells. We
Shinkle
talked about that in the Aldi Middleburg and Upperville episode.
So shinkle shells, weird design, because
like
guess what happened the night before or that morning? It rained. So what happens to paper mache when it
Or
gets
just
wet?
paper when it gets wet.
When it gets wet, it doesn't work. So Huntington's going to be delayed in firing his shells. But anywho, as you've got these troops out in this field, in these wheat fields and things, moving toward Lewiston Lane, they're going to become heavily engaged. The 5th Virginia and 7th Indiana will actually have their own little battle for a little while. As troops move back and forth across these fields, there's nobody to the right of the 5th or the left of the to the right of the 7th, left of the 5th. It's the river. So they're not looking that way. So they will have their own little fight for quite a while along the road and through these fields, not realizing that their compadres have retreated on either side. They're now in their own little war. Eventually, they will realize that and back off.
This is in the River Plain area.
This is in the River Plain area. During that entire time, and Jack, I know you and I have been there doing some observation. We were able to stand where the 5th Virginia was and see the coaling and understand that's a crazy spot to be. That height is launching a lot of artillery down on top of you in that field.
The best time to go to the coaling is probably in the fall or the winter.
Fall. Yeah.
Just because there's some tree cover in the River Plain area that obstructs a little bit of the viewing.
Yes.
Go there in the fall or winter and get on top of the coaling. And, I mean, it's an impressive. It's the far left flank of the Federals, but it commands the entire River Plain, which is the entire battlefield. Unless you come through the area directly to the front, which was wooded at the time of the battle. It's the base of the Massanutten. You'd have to come across some rolling hills in there and attack it head on. But the coaling is just dominating the battlefield, and Jackson knows it.
Yeah. And backing up those artillery pieces on the coaling is the 66th Ohio. So they'll play an important role later. Jackson he's going to realize immediately the coaling is an issue. He's going to send the 2nd and 4th Virginia, part of the Stonewall Brigade, to attack it. They're not even going to make it up the coaling. They're going to get hit pretty hard by the artillery, and be driven back.
Well,
now,
wait a second, Aaron. Let's just set up what the coaling is for a second. Yeah,
I
it's like
thought
we
you
keep
were- sorry.
no. We keep calling it the coaling, but
yeah. So the coaling is a place. At this time, it doesn't have trees on
Clear
it.
cut.
It's clear cut. They are using the trees for coal, so they're making charcoal out of this. So it's a clear area
on a hillside.
which is perfect for artillery. So the Union command is going to use that.
Yeah,
that
that's
spot.
why we call it the
And
coaling.
And it commands the fields below. So very bad spot if you're the Confederate infantry. But Jackson sees that quickly, send the 2nd and 4th Virginia against it. They get beaten back pretty quickly. The 2nd and 4th Virginia pretty much are going to be done with the battle at that point. Not because they're destroyed, not because they're in confusion or anything. They're just going to be pulled back. Now, to their chagrin, they're not happy about it. There's accounts of the 2nd and 4th Virginia soldiers, and I have a relative that was in the 4th, complaining that they didn't get another shot at the coaling. Jackson is going to have some of his, as Ewell starts to come online, crossing the North River Bridge, and they fire the bridge, Jackson is going to start sending his troops in, Ewell's troops in. The 58th Virginia and 44th Virginia are going to kind of go into the wood line and be on the flank of the Union troops as they push up. They're going to end up hitting the 5th and 7th Ohio right in the flank, just as they're pushing the rest of the Confederates back up through the field. It looks like it's a bad way. 58th and 44th Virginia comes in and flank attacks them. In the meantime, those Ohioans will move back toward the coaling. On that there will be General Taylor. Richard Taylor will deploy his Louisiana troops. Now, he's going to have the 6th Louisiana, that's going to be on the left, Wheat's Special Battalion, the 9th Louisiana, and the 8th Louisiana. He's going to have these guys right there at the coaling. They're going to hit the coaling the first time. When they do, they will take the coaling. Now, the problem is the 66th Ohio is there. The 66th is going to drive the Louisianians off the coaling. Everything, they're still fighting going on down here in the fields.
In the river plains.
But a lot of focus is now on that coaling. It's two massive men are part of these Louisiana troops.
Massive, literally.
Massive, literally, especially in Civil War times. Both over 6 foot. Actually, I think over 6'4". One says Chatham Robideau Wheat was 284 pounds. Maybe, back in the day, but in the picture, I'm saying he's 300. But we know William Peck, who's also part of that group, is like 330 pounds. Again, over 6'4". It's said that Jackson and some of the troops watched the progression on the coaling by watching those two on horseback because they were so massive. Now, that's probably folklore, but is it possible? Sure.
Yeah, you get the same account, and we didn't really hit on it with episode 1, but at 2nd Winchester, there's a lot of those accounts of Federals being able to see these big, massive guys that we know the names of, that they didn't, moving across the ravines of where West Fort was. So
they're massive men. So these guys are attacking the coaling. They're going to be beaten back by the 66th Ohio and the artillerymen that are there. They're going to reform, and their job is to take the coaling. So they're going to hit the coaling again. When they hit the coaling, they're going to start slitting the throats of the horses. There's going to be, I believe there was actually piles of bones found later, after the war, of where they had to burn the horse flesh. But to put in perspective, the Louisiana soldiers are Jackson's shock troops. These are guys, especially Wheat's battalion, they are ruffians, criminals. They're getting paid to kill, and they're happy about it.
It's like either go to prison or join the army.
Going to prison or join in the army. And that's exactly, they get paid to kill. They're happy. And this is actually a unit also that in Middletown at one point later, during the war, Jackson will actually come out and dance in the road with them. And they are extremely drunk. They're supposed to be watching the artillery trains.
So
really,
we'll talk about it in a later
we'll talk
episode,
about it in a later episode. But yeah, Jackson. There's accounts of Jackson actually dancing in the road with them, which is an thing, but he does it apparently. He never really yelled at the Tigers. They did a lot of good work for him.
But everything we talked about in episode 1, just think about that with the Louisiana Tigers here at Port Republic. This is where it really first happens, and it sets the stage for what these troops are capable of doing.
Yes.
And like I said, there's a great depiction of it with Keith Rocco's painting.
Rocco's painting is beautiful.
They do some. Once they ascend the hill, it's just all hell breaks loose. It's hand to hand.
It is.
The throats of the horses getting slit.
The second attack is actually the gunners up there are defending their pieces with the worms and sponges that they have in sidearms. Now they will be assisted by another of Clark's guns that comes up from the river and the 5th and 7th Ohio briefly, but they'll push the Louisianians back a second time. So this is our third attack on that coaling, and it's been somewhat successful, but not a lot. The 66th kind of has moved off at this point. The Tigers are down at the bottom, and to walk that terrain, if you walk through that wood line, which we've had to do, it's not just one little hill. There's a ton of little ridges through there. There's a place called Deep Run. They had to cross all that. So these guys are tired.
Just to get to
where the guns are. So they're very tired. Ewell at this point is going to ride up, and he's going to get in front of the Tigers, and we call them all Louisiana Tigers. But he's going to get in front of the Louisianians, and he's going to say, "Men, you know me. General Jackson wants us to take that hill." Before he can finish, he doesn't even give orders. With a rebel yell, up the hill the Louisianians go. And they take the coaling the third time. And this time they keep it. At that point, that renders the position of the federal forces along Lewiston Lane, it's untenable. They can't be there. Now they have artillery coming down, raking them in the flank. The Confederates are going to push and start chasing them back toward Conrad's store. That'll end basically the Battle of Port Republic, but another incident's going to happen where John C. Fremont will show up right at the end. But it's to no avail because Tyler has already been beaten and pushed back. When Fremont arrives, he's going to come up to the area, the Lawyer Road area, and all he's going to do is start launching some shells into the field.
Because he cannot cross the river.
He can't cross the river. The bridges have been burned and the river's too high. The problem is he's launching those shells onto his own wounded. There's about 900 and some casualties just in those fields. And so, Confederate wounded too, but he's dropping artillery shells on his own guys. And actually discussed Jackson a good bit in Ewell. I think it's a frustration thing. He didn't get there in time. Jackson will then just kind of go up to Mount Vernon Furnace up near Brown's Gap and hang out for about 7 days. His army will get some time to kind of replenish, but he will go toward Richmond. And then, of course, we know eventually the Valley forces will move toward Richmond to assist Robert E. Lee. But this is the end of Jackson's campaign. This is it. This is the Valley campaign as a whole, and it's done a lot. He's occupied more than 60,000 troops over the last couple of marched more
keeping
than
them away from
keeping
Richmond.
them away from Richmond and McClellan, who is always calling for troops. And he's marched over 600 miles in about 2 months. They literally get the name Jackson's Foot Cavalry because they're just as fast as cavalry when you get down to it. But this bolsters Jackson's reputation even more than First Manassas. The great defender of the Valley. He becomes the South's first really great, one of the first most talked about Civil War heroes or Southern heroes. You have Beauregard, Fort Sumter. He gets a lot of adulation for that. But Jackson, after Bull Run and then the Valley campaign, gets a lot of the Valley campaigns where he really shines. And Robert E. Lee, who's eventually going to take over the Army of Northern Virginia, has seen this. He's been instrumental as well into this Valley campaign. So he knows what Jackson can do, and that's why he ends up trusting him so much. Even after some of the debacle down at Richmond, Lee still has confidence in Jackson because he knows what he can do. And we see it later, at several other battles that Jackson's able to work independently and well, but within Lee's grand scheme. So that'll be the end of the Valley Campaign. The Union forces are thwarted there. Their job was to kind of prevent Jackson from going to Richmond. Jackson's job was to prevent them from going to Richmond. He did his job. They didn't.
Yeah, and I think without these battles, and you can't have Port Republic without having Cross Keys. Port Republic is like, the official stamp on the end of the campaign.
Yep.
If you did not have Port Republic and it did not go the way it did, Jackson's Valley campaign may not have been the way.
Not.
Yeah, and this campaign is studied by militaries across the world.
West Point.
I know. I have a a book that was published in like the 1950s by the Royal Army of Australia. That was a book they studied on the Jackson's Valley campaign.
Well, not that it's not a popular thing, but Hitler, even with his blitzkrieg, is kind of based off of Jackson's foot cavalry. His quick moving movements, flank movements.
Yeah,
there's a lot based on what Jackson did on the flank attacks and things. And the quick
just the whole strategy, and you wouldn't have and we'll cover 64 Valley campaign battles in later episodes, but you wouldn't have a 64 Valley campaign if Jackson did not set the tone for how important the Valley could be.
Yes.
Without his 62 Valley campaign, with what he could do here and what was the result of it, showed how important the Shenandoah Valley was. And obviously I'm a little biased, and we're all a little biased for living here, working here, and studying these battles and visiting them a lot more closely, but it truly is an important part of the entire, at least the Eastern Theater of the war.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And if you dive even deeper to it, the coaling, even though we're not fundraising for it to preserve it, it's now preserved, the coaling, a large portion of it. But if the coaling was not taken, who knows what would have happened at the Battle of Port Republic, and then defined what the Valley campaign was.
Especially with the way Jackson had to attack. Fremont eventually probably could have found a way across the river. That's a possibility. And, it could have been very different. I mean, the day before Jackson gets captured.
Almost. Yeah, exactly.
Almost captured. And if he gets captured, who knows? Totally different ballgame.
For sure. I know we covered basically like 3 battles in this episode, so it's a little bit of a longer one. Technically 4. But let's dive a little bit deeper just for a quick second about visiting the battlefield today. I know you gave a lot of shout outs to the National Historic District. Obviously, we work there, and it's an important national task that was done with creating the district and what it's doing today.
Yeah.
But let's say if folks want to visit the Port Republic, the Cross Keys battlefield, even Battle of Harrisonburg.
Yes.
Like you said, there's the 5 acres. I believe it's owned by UDC.
And I think we have the
there's an
Battlefield
easement.
Foundation has an easement there as well.
Yep. So you can visit that. You can see where the monument is, where Turner Ashby was
and
shot.
that monument is apparently very close to where he actually was shot.
Yeah. And it puts it, even though there's development all around it by James Madison University, you can go up there and you just kind of think about it. You can get an idea of what that battlefield was like.
Yeah, it's still a very prominent hill. You can see where the port road is and see where the initial attack was supposed to take place, and then why they moved to where they did. They moved to counter the Pennsylvania bucktails coming up. But you can see why the bucktails would choose to come up that height.
Yeah.
So then Harrisonburg.
Moving from there to Cross Keys, definitely visit where Union Church was, because you see that cemetery where the 15th Alabama was.
Even on the other side, and I think there's some work going on to try to save some of that property over there. On the it'd be the west side of the Cross Keys Road. That's where Fremont's original lines are, and so you can see the progression as he's trying to move toward the Confederate lines. You can see a lot of that. Then you get to Union Church, and behind you can see where the Confederate line is
at Mill Creek and Artillery Ridge, and you can then go there and visit Mill Creek Ridge, where the Maryland Monument is now. Yep. There's some logging roads that we assume where the 15th Alabama and other Confederate regiments that are pulling back that position would have used to climb the hill. And you can really get in perspective. Like I said, the best time to visit any battlefield is in the fall.
Yeah, when the foliage is down.
Yeah, when the foliage is down. But always visit battlefields anytime you can. And then from there, even going to Mill Creek Country Store, like we said, it's not a preserved location. Great place to grab lunch, but then also
and very supportive of the battlefield,
of the efforts, the preservation efforts there. But you can go to that area and see why Trimble wasn't satisfied, and then pulling off at some safe location along the Port Republic Road and going out to the Civil War Trail sign that's there, where the on the Widow Pence farm,
yes,
and visiting where the slaughter of the 8th New York happened,
and definitely go to the Mill Creek Church as well. There's a Civil War Trail sign there. It's behind Confederate lines, but it said that the arms and legs were actually stacked up to the second story window of that church.
Wow.
So a lot of carnage there.
Yeah, and then moving from there, you can go to the right flank of the whole line where Walker and Trimble's Ravine was at Goods Mill Road.
Several signs there.
Yeah, and from there, moving to Port Republic, obviously go into the town.
Yes.
The town has established a great tour there with some interpretive signage throughout the town, as well as the Port Republic Museum, which is, like Aaron said, is operated by the National Historic District, so you can visit that. I think it's open on weekends by appointment
right now, yeah.
So just give us a call and we can open that up. And then heading out to the Port Republic battlefield, the coaling obviously is an important place to go.
And if you want to ride down the middle of the battlefield, there is a road called Jackson's Way.
Which wasn't there.
There was an area there. I don't know that it was exactly that road, but that road goes down. Actually, that road is what 33rd Virginia and all them would have probably used. I think that's actually a part of where the River Road may have cut off to the right, toward the Balger farm.
I think it follows where 340 then ties into Jackson's Way. Is where the River Road ran at the time of the battle.
Because you'll run into the railroad tracks which were there, but if you go down Jackson's Way, you're riding right down the middle of that battlefield, and you can see the fields beside you and see why it's so devastating from the coaling to that point. All the way out to the Lewiston Lane.
Just keep in mind, if you're touring that battlefield, that the railroad you see there was not there at the time of the battle.
Yeah.
It was put in after the war.
And it is an active railroad, so watch out for trains.
Don't park on the tracks.
Please don't park on the tracks.
But you can visit the coaling, walk up the hill, and look over the river plain like we said.
Yeah.
And just get an understanding of the devastation that would have taken place from the coaling, but then also the feats it took to take the coaling from the Confederate side.
Oh yeah, it's an absolute. As Robert Craig said.
That's our book recommendation.
Yeah, Robert Craig, Conquering the Valley. But Robert Craig says every battlefield has a hell spot, and at Port Republic, the coaling is the hell spot for them.
Yeah. So if you're studying up on this battle, pick up a copy of Conquering the Valley by Robert or Bob Craig. It's an amazing study, in-depth study.
Yeah, and it goes through the battles of Cross Keys, Port Republic, Battle of Harrisonburg, everything we talked about.
Super in detail. It's got some great maps in there, and it's just still a trusted source of understanding these battles. So, we know that this episode wouldn't have been a little bit longer than our other episodes, but that's okay. We appreciate you all sticking with us.
Elijah's still awake over here.
Yeah, Elijah.
I think he's still
here.
awake.
Any archaeological notes that you've found or understand about any of these battlefields from your kind of side of things?
I've had the chance to detect a couple of places, mainly Cross Keys area. Nothing too crazy. Obviously, it's been hunted before, so it's kind of hard to
heavily hunted.
Heavily hunted to be able to get on anything to define one or the other. Bugle Mouth He's probably about the coolest thing that's come out of there.
Okay.
I mean, that's cool in the sense that that bugle has probably been used by Confederate troops to
sound something
in terms of the sway of the battle. But other than that, nothing personally.
I can say as far as down near Port Republic and the coaling, on some property over in that area, we have found Confederate round balls, of course, but just across from that was also 69 caliber Union bullets, and it was interesting to pull them out because the Union bullets are pointing toward the Confederates, and the round balls, of course, are round, but you could see just the progression of
Of
how
the
they,
battle.
of the battle, and it seems to be more toward the end of the battle at that point. So my guess would be that's probably our 110th, 84th Pennsylvania guys of Tyler's army that's firing those rounds.
Yeah, and what's amazing is Harrisonburg's probably one of the fastest growing cities in the state of Virginia.
Yes.
And I think it is the fastest growing, or it's neck and
Pretty
neck with
close.
Winchester.
Yeah.
The amazing thing is, obviously, we're a little biased talking about the National Historic District and the Battlefields Foundation, but that's rightfully so. The crossroads of the Port Republic and Cross Keys roads, 3 out of those 4 corners are preserved.
Yep.
So as much as Harrisonburg expansion's taking place, we know in perpetuity that those corners will not be ever developed.
Yep.
And a lot of these battlefields, especially Cross Keys and Port Republic, are almost in pristine condition. And a lot of easements have been placed on land out there, so maybe they're not owned in fee simple by SVBF or any other group like ABT, but preservation has been done to ensure that those properties won't be developed and can be viewed for future generations to understand these landscapes. So touring these battlefields is an awesome opportunity, especially near such close development that's rapidly increasing day by day.
Yes.
Other than that, I mean, that's those battles. I will say this bourbon was fantastic this episode.
Yeah.
Really good.
Yeah, we definitely had to refill the glass a couple times throughout it. So it was a great one. This port barrel finished, or it's just port barrel, was fantastic. And I encourage everyone to go out and try and grab a bottle of this if you can. It definitely adds a different aspect to a bourbon tasting that,
Absolutely.
it mixes it up a little bit, and it's definitely one to enjoy.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you guys for having me on. It's been a privilege to have been your first guest, and then a guest later here on the podcast, and just keep doing what you're doing. You're allowing me to come on and talk about something I'm passionate about. So I really appreciate both of you, Elijah and Jack, for getting this out here, and this is another great avenue of history for people to listen to and understand things.
We
So
appreciate that.
Yeah, we're
applause
glad
to
to
you
have you.
guys.
Yeah, no, you're a great guest to have and super knowledgeable, and I'm glad to call you a friend. And stay tuned because we'll definitely have you on for future episodes. And any recommendations for Aaron to talk about, we'll just make sure he studies them and learns them so we don't have to, and we can have him on and break them down for you guys. Don't forget to check out his social medias as well, because Aaron operates a fantastic resource for video content on YouTube and Facebook. Aaron Civil War Travels, super genuine and super researched, and just an easy way to digest what took place in these awesome places across the country. So feel free to check out his channels. And thanks you all so much for listening, watching, and viewing, and even subscribing to our stuff. Don't forget to share it, and we look forward to hearing from you all, and excited to make the next episodes.
Yes, indeed. We'll see you on the next one, y'all.
All right.